My name is Tina O'Dwyer, and I have worked through the Geopark LIFE programme with tourism enterprises on the Tourism Enterprises Action. And this was one of the 3 actions you'll hear about today that were deemed to be kind of vital to this idea of a tourism for conservation project. So what I'm going to do first is bring you through kind of our approach, the structure of what we did and how and why we approached it, and then maybe some of the things, the actions we took, the outcomes from that, and the learnings that we are able to share in that, particularly with a view to the future of the Afterlife programme, and also any other destinations that might be interested in doing something similar. So the first thing, I suppose, the why tourism enterprises were important is it started. The LIFE programme initially had an objective to support tourism enterprises to be more environmentally sustainable in their practices. And I think as we got into it, it kind of got a little bit more nuanced than that, and it was about how tourism enterprises could directly contribute to conservation of the landscape at the same time as leveraging it for economic and social benefit in the area. And that's a little bit, as I say, a little bit more nuanced. Here's some of the many members of the Burren Ecotourism Network, and there's a large number of them here today as well. I suppose one of the things when you start talking about tourism enterprises in abstract sense, you start to think about enterprise and corporations and profit and, you know, dirty profit and at the expense of the landscape and that kind of thing. And to put it in context, the tourism enterprises we're talking about are people like the ones here, who are, most of them are owner-managed businesses. Some are in community ownership, some are in public ownership. Many are, there's a few, you know, family-owned businesses that employ large numbers of people, but to a large extent they are the members of the community. They are part of the community, they're part of the business community and also the local community. So to bear in mind, this is who we're talking about when we talk about tourism enterprises. So to go through the approach we had, there was kind of 3 elements to it, and you do have a booklet in your pack about the tourism enterprises. Most of what I'm talking about is in here in greater detail, so it's kind of the edited highlights here. But the first one is the structure we put around this action, the standards that underlie it, and the marketing programme. They were the 3 key pillars of the Tourism Enterprises Action. So we'll look at those one by one. The first one, in terms of structure, it was decided early in the programme, rather than try to work with individual enterprises across the region, it was decided to work with a group of enterprises, which was the Burren Ecotourism Network, that you've heard mention of now. Now, the Burren Ecotourism Network pre-existed the LIFE programme. It had been, the formation had been instigated by the Geopark office, what was then the Burren Connect project, as far back as 2008, and had been nurtured and cultivated by the project, and so the relationship was already very strong. The aim of the Burren Ecotourism Network was to connect tourism enterprises in the region, to enable them to work together to achieve social, economic, environmental benefits for themselves, for the region, and for the community. And being able to demonstrate a commitment to sustainable tourism practices is a prerequisite of membership of the network. So the fit was very, very good to the Geopark LIFE programme. So that was the first thing, the idea of working with a network, and that was the structure around it. The second thing was standards. Both for the Ecotourism Network and the Geopark LIFE programme, standards were seen to be, and had been pre the programme, seen as critically important. Standards in sustainable environmental management and sustainable tourism that would be able to stand up to scrutiny, and that would have integrity and that could be independently verified. And it's probably fair to say it became a little bit of an obsession of the LIFE programme and the network at points in the programme. It's certainly something we have studied a lot, learned a lot, adapted to, trialled, learned, adapted, and what we have concluded with is the Code of Practice for Sustainable Tourism, and there's again details of that in the book. Now this is, I will talk more about it later on, but when we started, the initial objective of the programme at the beginning was to encourage tourism enterprises to aim for ecotourism and eco-accommodation labels that were independently verified, and at that time there was about 5 labels that were recognised by Fáilte Ireland, and it was to move people towards those. And what that saw, because that would give the independent verification and also the assumption that these bodies had the right standards in place. And we did find that they did have the right standards in place, but in practice it meant that we channeled a large number of businesses from this region of different sizes and of different activity into a variety of different labels that were some mainly in Ireland, some in the UK, and another more international one that was US based. And each of those standards had different levels within them. So we had the enterprises here achieving different levels within different standards. And the difficulty with that was we had no comparable standard or one common understanding. So while the external labels were excellent for individual enterprises, they're designed for individual enterprises and for them to work through, they didn't really work for us as a destination trying to bring a group of people through that. So that led to us adapting and pioneering the Code of Practice, which is a set of standards specific to this destination, and that can be adapted by others, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And in the afternoon workshops we will have a demonstration of the online system. So the next element was marketing, and the idea of having a strong destination marketing strategy as part of the LIFE programme and the work with tourism enterprises. And this was definitely subject of much debate in the very first year of the programme, when the steering group was first sitting around together, and legitimately people were saying, this is a tourism for conservation programme, what on earth are we doing investing in marketing? What is this about? And that debate in itself was interesting, but the reason for it was that well, there's a number of reasons. Partly, it was the economic incentive for being involved in the programme, that tourism enterprises who were going to opt in and do this work and contribute money and time also needed to have a tangible reward for that. The other thing, which Carol alluded to earlier, is having the type of visitor that works for a sustainable tourism destination means communicating your destination in a way that attracts that visitor, and promoting the destination as a sustainable destination for a visitor who wants to stay a while, stay longer, uncover the destination, and meet the smaller type enterprise that exists here. That was very much part of that strategy as well. So they were kind of the three elements that stood together. If you were, and I know it might sound a little bit complicated, if you were a tourism enterprise seeking to work with the LIFE programme, the journey as such was that you would join the Burren Ecotourism Network, you would get involved in that structure. Through that you would get access to training and supports and mentoring and tools that would enable you to reach the standards and enable you to go about achieving the Code of Practice and have it verified. And then once you had done that, you became part of the destination marketing programme, got access to the brand, the destination brand, and became part of that programme. One of the key things, I mentioned the brand there, it's this one here that you see on the programmes. One of the key tenets of the marketing side was it sought to marry the environmental benefit with the economic benefit. So we tried to take the ethos of the network and the ethos of the Geopark and turn that into a competitive advantage to make that the USP for the destination, so that the Burren and Cliffs of Moher Geopark destination came to stand for ecotourism and sustainable tourism and best practice in that area. And pooling the resources of the partners behind that one brand was a key part of the marketing strategy. So they're the three elements of it. So moving on then to what we actually did and what we might have learned from that. There's a selection of the Burren Ecotourism Network members at a training event. It could have possibly been a marketing event. I'm not sure. It's one of many, many, many events where the group came together in a room to learn, discuss, shape and innovate. And you'll see quite a lot of that. What I'm going to present here in terms of what we did and what we're suggesting as guidelines is not to suggest that we did it all right, or it is all right now, or that we did everything that is in the guidelines, because some of the things that are guidelines are there because we didn't do them and should have done them, or we did do them and shouldn't have, whichever it is. So it's really just to share as much as we know at this point, and as Carol said, we're still very much on the journey. So I'll talk through the guidelines. The first one, we're calling it Make It Together. This idea of working together and working with the network has been really, really valuable in this destination, and has certainly something we hope to continue. The benefits of working with a network over individual enterprises were, a few of them were, it's a specific structured platform for engagement. The Geopark LIFE programme provided funding for coordinators, for marketing, for network development, for facilitation, and also funding for training and co-funding for marketing projects. And with those resources, with people and coordinators, it was very easy to work with what was a very structured network. There was a point of contact, there was emails, there was phone numbers, there was communication channels, there was websites, all of those kind of things. It was a platform. It was also a space to come together where people could develop a common vision and a common purpose. By no means did we always agree, but certainly we always discussed and debated, and over time the purpose and the vision became clear and it became shared by the businesses, but also by the Geopark and the other partners that were involved in that. It gave a sense of purpose beyond just what me and my business gets out of this. It was also became very much the ethos of the network became, what can I contribute to this? And as someone, Riley, said one day, you know, you pay your money and then you get to do a whole lot of work, which was different to other networks where you pay your money and got a whole lot of benefit. So, the groups, the group created their own benefit over time together with the Geopark and that. So there was a lot of benefits to working with the network. The other reason for a network is it has a stronger chance of survival after life than the group individually. So the idea was that this group would become, it had an ambition to grow, the Geopark had an ambition to widen out the sustainable ethos, and it was in everybody's interest that both grew and got strong and would be able to sustain after that. So make it together would be the first kind of guideline or recommendation. The second one then was make it real, and like I said, we really grappled a lot with standards with very good intentions of doing the right thing with the best of integrity and being able to stand up to scrutiny and to be real, not to say we were practicing sustainable tourism, to actually be doing it and be able to verify that. And one of the questions that kind of came up is why, again in the early days, a certain amount maybe of frustration and impatience and lack of really understanding why is it so hard for tourism enterprises to practice sustainable tourism? Isn't it obvious that they would do it? Isn't it in their interest to protect the natural resource? Don't they also feel the obligation to do it? And a certain sense of, you know, why don't they? And that kind of became a real question of, well, why don't they? What exactly is the reason why people don't? And some of the things we uncovered is that, well, number one, people do, may not be aware that they do, but they do, and are also kind of a little bit shy about saying that they do. They're shy about it because nobody wants to be seen to be greenwashing or to be pretending there's something they're not. There's also a genuine reservation that I'm not green enough. I'm not as green as that person over there, so I couldn't be in this network as well, or I couldn't be claiming that I'm doing what they're doing. There was also certainly a level of fear around the level of what was required to be considered a sustainable tourism enterprise, the number of measures you were required to change in your business, the extent to which it pervaded all aspects of your business. So if you look at the criteria of most of the labels, or the European Tourism Indicator System or the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, there's 40, 50, 60, 70 criteria to meet in order to reach the thing. So even one criteria to change all the light bulbs in this hotel, for example, requires a huge investment and a huge amount of time. To think about changing 50 things in your business or implementing 50 things really is a big thing. So even just acknowledging that is important. And it's also just a little bit scary. It's a little bit intimidating, and a fear that maybe I'm just not able for this, which is the other thing. So it rarely is because businesses couldn't be bothered or because it doesn't make them profit. There's a lot of very genuine reasons that go behind that as well. And one person, a former member of the network, once said, I think they were talking behind my back and they were calling it the Burren Eco-Terrorism Network, which I had to laugh at when I heard. And you know, not everything they say about you is flattering, but it was kind of interesting that eco-terrorism, while it's funny, it's a real gallows humour kind of thing, that there's an element of that about it, that it is a little bit intimidating to step into this space. And what the Geopark wanted to do, one of the other difficulties with certification was to get certified, you already had to be practicing at a very high standard. So if you were only working with people who were certified, you were preaching to the choir. And what the Geopark wanted to do was to extend out this practice, and what the network wanted to do beyond the core that were already the examples, and to enable others to do it and kind of open the doors. So that's where the code of practice came from. It was the idea to take all these big aspirations and standards and criteria and make them real to this destination, and make them meaningful for the businesses who were in the network, and make it real for this destination, make it real for the visitor. So meaningful and relevant were the important parts of that. And what that meant is we have localized the standards effectively. So taken the principles and the spirit of all the global and European standards and made them local to here. And when I say local, I don't mean that they were lessened, I just mean they were localized. So the language is very direct. it's very specific, it's action driven. You need to do this, you need to write an environmental policy. Here's a template to help you do it. Here's an example of somebody else who's done it. So it made it very practical. It included things that were very easy to do but which are important to the destination, like join the network, like put your logo on the website, and then things that are much more challenging, like monitor and measure your water and energy usage over the course of a month and track it over the year. So that was kind of where it is. The benefit of the code of practice, and the details are in that, there's 6 principles, there's about 60 measures, is that it opens the door to everybody. You don't have to get 100% at the beginning. You can start at about 25%, which is the minimum. You can work your way through that over time. You can understand exactly what it means relating to you, your visitor, and your thing. The most important thing, it gave us a common standard. It gave us the same standard for everyone, irrespective of the size of their business or the nature of their activity. So when you're in meetings and when you're talking to visitors about what it is the Burren Ecotourism Network does, we were all doing the same thing to the level appropriate to the business, or they were all doing the same thing. So the Code of Practice is now on an online system with a toolkit. Like I said, it'll be there later, but there's also information on it on the Burren Geopark website if anybody wants to download that later. So the next guideline was Guideline 3, which was Make It Possible. And this related really to some of the questions that I mentioned earlier. Why don't people do it was one of the things, and one of the questions, apart from asking understanding, well, why don't they, was, well, how, now that we know all that, how do we make it possible for businesses to engage in this code of practice? How does the average small and medium sized tourism enterprise engage with this in an effective way and in a way that really makes a difference? And Geopark LIFE's funding was really given for training, training interventions. I think it had a goal of 2,000 training days for 100 enterprises over the course of a 4-year program. So the training became very focused on that question: how do we make it possible and how do we make it easy? And in this sense, there's many partners in the Geopark LIFE program on this action on tourism enterprises. The key partners were the Burren Ecotourism Network, as the I suppose the main partner and the agent, the Geopark office itself, the environment section of Clare County Council, and Fáilte Ireland, and they would have been the groups that really, the subgroup that worked on this. And I think we probably fumbled around a little bit at the beginning in terms of getting it right as how that would be, but certainly we got a good flow in it then in the other years. And I think what was very nice about this training part was the level of engagement really by the enterprises and showing up for the training over and over again. Also the environment section of Clare County Council, who there was like Joan and Tracy and Karen, I won't mention them all, who came and delivered training, and who in the beginning, the training was, we discovered very early the gap between what the public resources were and the training needs of the businesses, and the communication gap, and how we jointly got over that and developed training programs that got better and better. How much they made themselves available to enterprises, and how much enterprises valued being able to have a direct and personal contact with people like that. Another fear is the fear of regulation and the fear of getting caught doing something wrong. So to engage directly with the environment section was really, really beneficial, and I think delivered benefits to them as well in their remit to roll out policy and to roll out education and understanding of what was required by policy. And equally, Fáilte Ireland were highly innovative and entrepreneurial in engaging with this training programme and in adapting the resources they could bring specifically to this network. And Michael is here and many more in the team in Fáilte Ireland and the west of Ireland and nationally really adapted and flexed it, and I think you would probably call it across all those agencies. The Geopark office in Carroll would have been equally entrepreneurial, not in decreeing training, but in really engaging in consultation and dialogue after each cycle of training. Well, what worked, what didn't work, what do we need next time around, what do you think? And I think that was a very sweet little space to be in, where we had 4 or 5 agencies along with a large network of enterprises who were dialoguing and shaping programs and supports that worked and that delivered. So make it possible, I think, depends on the back to make it together on doing that in an entrepreneurial and in an innovative way together that's targeted on the outcomes you want. So the next one is make it pay environmentally. So that's the big question: did it pay? Did it make any difference to anybody? For all our talk, what did it deliver at the end of the day? And I think there's a few levels here. There's the statistics and the analysis of what happened, and then there's kind of the impact of those statistics and what happened after that. So one of the thing that Geopark LIFE was in its the nuts and bolts of what it was about in its proposal and in the actions was to measure the use of environmental management techniques by tourism enterprises, comparing pre-training and post-training. So that was our indicator. Did the training make a difference? Were businesses more environmentally sustainable afterwards than they were before? And the training was delivered in cycles. We had 2 cycles of environmental training. There were cycles of economic training, economic type training, and then heritage and landscape training as well. So focusing on the environmental one, it was as businesses joined, they got training on developing and implementing the code of practice. And we, through an enterprise survey, what we had to do was measure businesses' own evaluation of where that was and looking at what they could show. The code was always independently verified. So what they were claiming they had done was verified by external evaluators as well. So some of the examples was businesses' views and attitudes and reporting. So my business lessened its environmental impact as a result of the programme. 87% found that in the first cycle and 100% in the second cycle. And as I say, these are verified independently as well. The programme significantly enhanced my awareness of environmental management techniques. 44% in the first cycle and 100% in the second. And I think the 44 kind of highlights how we fumbled a little bit in the very first ones and how we got better at that particular thing as we went along. And my business has been generally strengthened as a result of the programme, so 80% and 100% on that. And that was because it was really important that businesses felt this environmental management approach also strengthened their business, because fundamentally they're businesses and their main purpose is to make sure they remain profitable and viable as businesses as well. So that was important. The environmental management, the code requires or shapes a path for a business to set up their own environmental management system, and that's kind of broken down into creating an environmental policy, writing an action plan for the coming year, the coming number of years, monitoring what you do currently, setting targets for performance, and then reporting on that on an annual basis. So that's the core of the system that everybody would have. These statistics are for what happened after each cycle. After 2 to 3 years into the programme, we also checked, well, what are you still doing? And how has it impacted on your business over time? So 88% of those who had originally gone through the cycle were still continuing to measure, monitor and set targets, even particularly without a code submission. In terms of asking, had it made any lasting impact on your business, what the businesses themselves reported as the numbers who, sorry, I've gone the wrong way. Changes in how we manage resources, 74% said they had lasting changes in their businesses at that. How we communicate with staff, 77%. The information we provide to visitors had been changed and influenced as a result, 87%. How they communicate with visitors when they were with us, 84%. How they manage visitors when they are with us. How we plan our business, 79%. Our contribution to the community, 88%. So I'm aware they're just statistics of people who have gone through a training program saying what they've done as a result of it, and that's the indicators were quite clear in the LIFE program. That's what we could measure very specifically. What we can't measure as specifically is the impact of those changes being made, not just across one business, but across 40, 50, 60 businesses who might have been involved in the program. If everybody has changed the way they communicate with their visitors, or how they manage their visitors in the landscape, or how they contribute to their community, or how they manage their resources, the impact can be significant. But that's happening out there in the delivery of the tourism, and is harder to put into kind of statistical figure. And the other thing apart from that was the general environmental impacts. There are on the Geopark website a number of case studies of individual enterprises who would have achieved high levels of excellence in particular aspects of the code or particular parts of environmental management. And I think the Geopark will continue to highlight case studies like that. So while you had collective impact, you also had huge and exemplary impact within individual enterprises. And I think you'll find that what a business can do will vary according to their activity and their size and their resources. And so what happens individually is also of great impact. And then apart from that, I think the training and the stats I put up here, that kind of training and coming together and knowledge that was shared and created within the group had it was a catalyst effect for other bigger type things. And it's kind of like when that stuff was done and put to bed, things like there's a conservation and advocacy group in the network who run more destination conservation type activities now, like Adopt a Hedgerow, where businesses in the network adopt a stretch of road and clean it up periodically during the year. I know I heard that like 10 businesses that collected 36 bags of rubbish in October in 1 or 2 days, where they went out simultaneously and did that. So that's a destination program now that's come out of people being in rooms and coming up with better ideas for doing things. The Mehel program, which is where once a year the businesses will go out and do something to pay back the landscape or the landowners, like building walls or enhancing butterfly habitats or stuff like that happens. The Burren Food Fair, there's beach cleanups, there's work with schools, there's a whole lot of destination stuff that has arisen out of the program. So that's kind of the environmental benefit in a nutshell. The next one then is, did it pay economically or make it pay economically? And like I said, the LIFE program took the view that the 3 pillars of sustainability are environmental, economic and social, and so the program sought to mirror that with an environmental program and an economic program, and through that having a social impact. So the destination management program was part of that. Also, and the LIFE program provided funding for the network, like I said, co-funding of marketing projects, facilitators and coordinators to work on developing particular projects, and also training. And a lot of training came through Fáilte Ireland with this as well, in terms of business management and business enhancement type stuff. So again, what we were asking on this in terms of measurement was the attitudes and beliefs of enterprise managers and owners as to whether their business had been strengthened as a result of the program. So it was the question of whether the environment had benefited, but also whether the business had benefited. We had 3 cycles of environmental training, and you can see the belief was quite high in each of those that the business had been strengthened as a result of the program. Whether businesses, we sought to measure business confidence of the businesses who were in the area. We expect an improvement in business performance in the coming year is also reasonably high, and in the national context at that time would have been considerably higher than similar figures we would have been hearing from the tourism industry. And as to whether we are confident or very confident in the long-term sustainability of the enterprise, the figure there was equally quite high, 78%, 100% and 87%. So business confidence was high within the network, and the impact economically was also high. 88% of businesses report that the bottom line costs of their businesses had reduced as a result of engaging with the Code of Practice program. So again, they're kind of the stats pre-training, post-training, and I think probably one of the things that we also checked was the awareness of the destination marketing campaign, whether businesses felt that had improved through the program. So again, 97% felt awareness of the destination had improved, and we were marketing under the Burren Cliffs of Moher Geopark destination. Local awareness 78%, national and international awareness 75%, engaged in new commercial activity 56%. And again, we found that figure low. It's from a coordinator point of view, I found that low, given that there was a huge amount of commercial activity in the marketing program. Some of the things that really worked were new visitor destination experiences, like the food trail or the Burren activity trail, participating in national promotional events like Mehel or the ITOA, having a website for the destination, hosting trade visits, hosting media visits, individually and as a destination. There was a lot of commercial activity. We'd also invested in creating a collective social media strategy for the group, so not enhancing individual skills but collective social media skills, structuring a networking and referrals program, so really building the links between the businesses so that they were better able to circulate visitors when they were here, putting the destination first at all times, I guess, and they're kind of things that worked on a marketing front. And like I said, I had my figure wrong. 81% felt that there was an improvement in the bottom line costs. And in terms of feedback from the enterprises, one of the things that's mentioned repeatedly as a benefit was that as very small enterprises with very limited resources, through the network and the LIFE program, they were able to access a slice of a professional marketing resource. And that seemed to be really very important to enterprises, and I think it's something not to underestimate for anyone considering taking it on in the future. It's a really critical part of it, particularly for a collection of enterprises like that. So the training was one thing, the assessment after training, the catalyst that it was for some highly innovative tourism experiences and approaches to tourism promotion is probably the bigger impact and the more lasting impact. And something happened only yesterday or the day before, and I've added this to the slide kind of at the last minute. The man in the centre there with the glasses is Brian O'Brien, and he owns Annam Coffee, which is the Burren Coffee Roastery. I think he might only be 2 years set up, 2 to 3 years. If I think about 2 years, he had left corporate life in the UK, returned to County Clare, set up a coffee roastery in possibly the most out-of-way place you could possibly find one. And we'd been trying to catch up for a while. We caught up this week, and 2 years in, his business is doing phenomenally well, and it was about his experience of being involved in the network. And he said something that was really just landed with me. He said it was like a fellowship of entrepreneurship in an ethos of sustainability. And nobody's ever said that before, but it really captured a lot of what it was about. And I think letting that one sit really, a fellowship of entrepreneurship in a destination like that, with the confidence figures you were seeing there of businesses that really are what's perceived to be a hard place to do business, feeling very confident. And I think, I might be wrong in this, and I guess the businesses you'll meet certainly got a sense of vibrancy and confidence from each other and from the programme and from the momentum. And even now, as we end the LIFE programme, a new business can value that as something very important. And he spoke about mentors he had found within the network who were extremely generous with their learnings, with supporting his businesses, other members who stocked his coffee very, very quickly and very readily. And he won't allow everyone to stock it because there's a high quality process with the coffee. And he spoke about meeting businesses, even not in his sector, who they met on terms of quality and ethos. They had a meeting of minds and a meeting of business. And if we could capture that and bottle it, it would be great. And I felt the fellowship of entrepreneurship exists within the network, but extended beyond that. And I mentioned that already, the entrepreneurship in terms of how you approach working with businesses and private sector stakeholder was shown very clearly by the Geopark management, by Carol, by Fáilte Ireland, and by the environment section, and the wider group in terms of enabling that momentum. So that was important. And then I guess the group, there's been a lot of achievements and a lot of things we look back on that we're quite proud of, and the group is ambitious for that to continue, and the Geopark equally so. And that then becomes the next big question about how do you make it last? How does stuff like this continue outside something like a funding structure and a partnership structure like the LIFE programme? And Gabriel spoke about that. We have to continue the partnership model, and it's a real, I suppose this is the bit, there's guidelines there, this is what we know right now, and this is one that, if I'm honest, we probably haven't cracked, and it's kind of the question that is there now is how do we make it last? And after 3 or 4 cycles of training and marketing development and product development and strengthening and enhancing the capacity of the network, towards the end of year 4 and year 5, the last year, very much the thing was, well, how do we make this continue? And attention turned towards what was called resource planning, as a strand of the programme. And initially at the start of the programme, resource planning was designed to business planning for the individual enterprises who would have been part of that. And during the programme that shifted to business planning for the Burren Ecotourism Network itself, so that the network could continue and possibly be the main vehicle for continuing the type of activity and programmes that I've gone through there, and the impacts. And I think I hope in the slides I've shown there, the beneficiaries of the Tourism Enterprises programme were certainly the tourism enterprises, but also the Geopark in terms of having a vehicle to implement its policy and a group to work with and a group to test and evaluate things with. Also, it delivered benefits to the environment section of the County Council in terms of, again, their ability to implement their policy and work with stakeholders on the ground, and to Fáilte Ireland in terms of how efficient it became to work with this group and again implement things quickly and efficiently into a high quality way. So there were many beneficiaries beyond just, and that I guess was highlighted in the level of partnership that existed, and so the contribution or the benefit kind of came back across those sectors. So the last part worked on developing a strategic plan for the network in conjunction with the network, and that was created, and it was identified kind of the minimum resources required to keep this going, and they're substantial, I guess, in terms of people and funds. And through that process, the group identified its minimum requirements and potential places to find funding and to generate funding, and it prepared for that in terms of restructuring its membership fees and its membership levels. And there's various plans now in place for the network to commercialise some of its activities, and also to maybe develop and maintain the kind of strategic partnerships that are there now. But it is certainly challenging because the that space, that sweet little space that existed in Geopark LIFE doesn't exist in the real world right now, and there are kind of some systemic barriers that exist to that. So back out in the real world now, the Burren Ecotourism Network will find itself making applications for funding that are individualised, that are piecemeal, that are laborious, that take an awful long time to develop, that invariably get rejected once or twice, that then have to go back again, and that are time limited and project bound. So that space where funding wasn't the issue, that opened up the space where you could do things like create food trails. All the energy went into the innovation, the creativity, the working together, all the people time went into that, the money went into that. Same as that's the group out on Amehel who had been spent a day in November last year working on a local farmer's land on butterfly habitats and fixing some damage that had been done by tourists over the winter. Or back into rooms with, that's Joan, who was at that time in the Environment section of Clare County Council, working with tourism enterprises and how do you get better at environmental management? How do you implement this policy? How do you avail of these resources? That's ideally, when we were there, confidence was high, clarity was high, and there was great security around that, and wonderful, wonderful things happened in terms of innovation and creativity. And now we find that space has gone, and the network is back in the role of beneficiary, seeking to get funds from donors, which are the agencies. So, and we're trying not to fall back into those silos, and we're trying very much to keep the strategic partnerships alive and to build those and continue those. But I guess that's kind of the question, or the big question for everyone, I suppose, leaving the LIFE programme, is how do we achieve multi-stakeholder participation in something like this, where everybody benefits and everybody contributes in a planned way and in a strategic way and in a consultative way. The difficulty with the grantee type system is that there's a power dynamic attached to that, and there's an authority dynamic attached to that, where almost the private sector or the tourism enterprises have the begging bowl in their hands, waiting for some money or applying for that. And while the people who have the money and the agencies are very willing, I mean, we also found that entrepreneurial spirit exists there, the system might work against it a little bit at times. So that to me really is the big question for the future, is how do you, if we want these kind of benefits, and if you're another destination looking at trying to implement them, I would say start with the end in mind. Don't start it and see can you get the network set up and get it running and all the rest. Start with the view that if you want it to continue over time, there's a minimum level of resources required. There's resources required for people, for coordinators, for vision makers, for want of a better word, for marketing, for training and funding. And it's not gastronomical, it's not enormous amounts of money in the scheme of the types of budgets that are there for different things, but it is a substantial amount of money, and it's beyond the voluntary effort of tourism enterprises to pull that together. So I would say start with the end in mind, have a destination management plan that includes something like a network in it and the funding of it, have a network business plan where the business itself needs to become, or the network, a kind of social enterprise that's capable of being financially self-sustainable. Be prepared to commercialise some of the things that the networks do, and ideally identify the minimum costs and see can resources be pooled to meet those costs, so that some resources come from the membership fees, which, for example, in the tourism network, Burren Ecotourism Network, range from 350 to €1,000, so they're not insignificant for a small business to pay. Take that money, match it with from the various other beneficiaries, and see can, in a planned and strategic and collaborative way, can that all those resources be spent to best ability. In the Geopark LIFE programme, there was a formal memorandum of understanding between the Geopark and the Burren Ecotourism Network that did exactly that. It said, here's what we need, here's the resources, here's how we'll work together, and as I hope is evident, the results can be good for everybody. So that's kind of the concluding question. There will be the code of practice in the afternoon, and obviously there will be questions later. So thanks very much for listening.